Welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore the final journey of Uranus, the planet which in mythology rules the sky. Is very much linked to progressive and innovative energies, but can also be very provocative and disruptive in not always a welcome way. And Uranus returning back to Taurus, which it left on July the 7th, once Uranus made its first visit to Gemini. What we've got now is an opportunity through to the 26th of April next year to really get clear about the lessons that Uranus has taught us since the middle of May 2018 when he first arrived in Taurus, and if there are still some things we need to change. Because Uranus could push us to alter the status quo, and the sign of Taurus has a tremendous appreciation for continuity, stability. It's a fixed sign, but having Uranus in its full here, we have one energy which is restless and another one which resists any kind of change, and that creates tension. Now, because it's at the very end of its journey through the sign of Taurus, it's only going to get back through on the 4th of February to 27 degrees 27 minutes. So if you are a fixed sign, and that includes Taurus, Leo, Scorpio or Aquarius, with energies in your chart or points from around about 25 degrees through to the end of that fixed sign, you're going to feel this very strongly. We've also got a new solar eclipse series which is starting next year, the first of which is in Aquarius on the 17th of February, and that's going to be squaring up to Uranus too. So that will provide a backdrop of potential turbulence as well over the following 6 months. However, of course, Uranus is the modern progressive ruler of the sign of Aquarius. So there is some mutual receptivity on that event which is upcoming. But what I'm going to do for you now is just give you a flavour of what I feel this retrograde through to the 4th of February in particular is going to focus our attention on. But in general, we do need to look back to March 2019 when Uranus moved into Taurus for the longer haul after that brief visit from the middle of May to the 6th of November 2018, and just consider what impact it's had on each of our lives. Where have we been forced to change things? Where have there been tensions? Where have we found some push to alter something almost irresistible, even if it's not necessarily what we thought we needed at that time? So I'm going to go through what the archetypes are for Uranus's retrograde in Taurus. But first of all, I want to share with you the event chart which occurred on May the 15th, 2018. Because whenever planets move into new homes, we have to take that snapshot, because that's a little bit like a baby being born. This is the birth chart of this particular visit to Taurus on this occasion. And of course, when it last went into the sign of Taurus, which was in the 30s, that caused huge disruption. And we had the Second World War. It first nibbled out of the sign of Taurus, August 1941, before fully leaving in May 1942. So by that stage, the war was very entrenched and pushing nearer to its end journey. But one of the things that creates that kind of energy is that the sign of Taurus can be about land, but it can also be about resources. It can also be about agriculture, and of course it can be about money, and it can be about our self-worth and values. And what we have seen is some very aggressive energy that's played out since May 2018, but we've also had COVID as well, and the impact on us all financially of COVID, of the cost of living going up because of the strife and wars that we've had going on in the world has been very powerfully felt by many of us. So we really haven't experienced Uranus in Taurus in a particularly pleasant way. Some other things that have come up, I should just say, are things like the cashless society. If you're someone who feels very passionately that people should still be able to use cash and also perhaps even exchange or barter, and everything done online or using a card or on your phone may be something that you resist. But for many people, I've embraced those ways of paying for goods. And of course, we've also seen a huge growth of online buying and selling, and traditional ways of selling have declined. The high street, for example, which is very much to do with bricks and mortar, much more of that steady energy that Taurus can be about. So I'm going to share that initial chart with you first of all, then I'm going to share the event chart for as Uranus returns to Taurus, and then take you all through and then give you a flavour of what you can expect between now and the 26th of April for your zodiac sign. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell, a very warm welcome. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, we have found that way over 50% of people regularly watch my videos and not subscribers. If that's you, please help the channel to continue to thrive, but also your likes and comments are great for the algorithm too, so they're really appreciated as well. If you would like to have a one-to-one with me, please see my testimonials on the screen, the latest few, but please look below and you can check out the ones that are on my website. And talking of my website, we're really making progress with reconfiguring that. You can also get your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each day by subscribing for that. But check out the website at patrickarundell.com. And just briefly, if you are wanting your personal forecast for next year, your transits, if you order it now, you can get the rest of this year free. But also my special package of 30% off, get your free gift of your general, love, Chinese and Indian written forecasts for the next year. And it really is a great value package, and most of all, it's totally unique for each person it's produced for. Please see below for more. So on the screen now is the event chart based on solar of when Uranus moved into Taurus on the 15th of May 2018. Now look at the position of Mars. It may be aligned in terms of the element because it was just on that anaretic degree in Capricorn, the very last degree, with just a few minutes left, but it soon moved into Aquarius. That's a square all day long, literally only a few minutes away. So when we get the fast moving energy of Uranus, which can be impatient, very restless, perhaps even a bit reckless at times, and we add to that the feisty Mars. Mars actually really is very good in the sign of Capricorn. It's exalted, but of course it was coming to the end of the journey. But Mars there can be very ambitious. So the ambition could be to achieve something that had the benefit of creating extra wealth or enrichment for certain people by making very, very quick moves. So what we've experienced since then with Mars and Uranus, it's a very volatile mix. It's a very high ignition mix, that square, because that desire side that we can get with Taurus, wanting to consume the good things in life. And you can see that Mercury was there as well, so that was in a square with Mars as well. And ironically, it was on a Taurus new moon. Now the moon in Taurus is exalted, so it's its second favourite location, and the irony is that the moon was actually in a very good link with the position of Mars once Uranus arrived. So on the face of it, there may have been certain approaches to economic affairs that were more innovative, fresh, very dramatic, but there could also have been a little bit of haste used in order to hatch certain plans. And I think what happened with Ukraine, the invasion there, was a classic example of that, because yes, we could say from Russia's viewpoint it was a political motive, but I think it's very much to do with raw resources. You know, it is to do with the rare minerals, it is to do with the oil, it is to do with the fish, the melons, the corn, whatever, from an agricultural viewpoint, which Taurus is very much about. So we saw a kind of blitzkrieg energy, and that energy from that initial chart is what we've been dealing with ever since, because there's been a total lack of stability around everyday money. We've seen the cost of living going up exponentially in a very, very unsettling way. which is, there's probably no one that hasn't affected at some level. And that's been very, very hard to deal with. Now, if we look at the event chart on the screen now of Uranus's return to Taurus, the intriguing thing is, you can see there at 29:59 retrograde. So I've done this as a solar illustration in the second house. But look on the other side of the heavens. Who do we have opposite Uranus? We have Mars and Mercury. Now Mercury is a bit wider. The square in 2018 was much tighter, but Mars is in a direct opposition, all but what, a couple of degrees. So that red hot energy that was created, the restlessness, the impatience, the impetuousness, doing things first, talking about it later, which has really challenged that stability and continuity that Taurus so appreciates. I feel that from now right through to the 26th of April, we are going to see potentially more instability. What pushes back against that with this chart? Well, Saturn, the planet of structure but also of limitation, is actually anchoring the position of Uranus in a much more valuable way. But what challenges that, to be honest, is the ruler of the sign of Taurus is Venus. Venus has just moved into the sign of Scorpio, which is about long-term finance, and that's in its detriment, and that's square into the modern ruler of the sign of Scorpio, Pluto. So that can create a lot of stuff to do with possessiveness, jealousy, disruption to long-term plans, perhaps through technology with Pluto and Aquarius, where it can be very detached, cold, not as humanistic as you might think of the sign of Aquarius at all. And that position of Pluto in that square with Venus is intriguing, because although Pluto and Uranus are still in touch and a trine, Uranus and Venus are in a quincunx. So the ruler of the sign of Taurus is in touch with Uranus, but not in a positive way. So I think what we're going to see, particularly with Uranus in that opposition with Mars, is more quick changes. And I think generally the financial climate is going to be very, very unsteady right through to when we finally see and say goodbye to Uranus on the 26th of April. And I think for many of us, it will be good riddance, to be honest. But we have had to deal with it. So that event chart shows that as much as Saturn may be trying to use experience and knowledge and wisdom to slow things down, this could be the way central banks try to pump a little bit of money into the system to keep liquidity, maybe change interest rates to just revive things a little bit, or hire them if things are getting too hot. But we've got, in terms of equities, a lot of overvaluation, it seems, at the moment, but a lot of uncertainty about things like AI stocks, whether it's to do with digital currencies. Again, there's been some controversy politically around those, and all of those things, I think, are going to shake out. I think we're going to see it, to be honest, by the end of November, because we just had a pretty challenging Taurus full moon, but the new moon in Scorpio, which is about shared finances, long-term financial planning, anything to do with investments, maybe to do with business, taxation, yeah, hot topic in Britain. We got a big wallop coming. So I think financially, you may have read online in the papers that there is the potential for a big downturn. I don't think it's exaggerated, to be honest. I really don't think it is. So because Taurus rules money and resources, and Uranus retrograde, we're being asked to think deeper and more introspectively about how we use our resources. But also we need to perhaps develop some new approaches to our stewardship of our resources. And we live in a society, and one of the things that my wife and I often talk about is that whether you buy a pillow or a bed, nothing seems to be made like it was many years ago. And even if you do try to buy something that's a bit better quality, it never seems to match that peerless level when there were no different sizes or specification. They just worked because a lot of them had perhaps natural materials in, and all the synthetic materials we use may give us a quick item at a lower price, but it doesn't last very long. And that's a classic Uranus-Taurus mix, because yeah, we can go for the quick gain, but if it ends up costing us more in the long term, but critically also ends up costing us ecologically, because we're chucking stuff away that doesn't last, that's not very good for us financially, and it's not very good for the planet either. So what we can find for all of us through to the end of April next year, but particularly through to the 4th of February, we're being pushed really to work harder at awakening our sense of our values, becoming much more intimately in touch with what we consume, very Taurus, what we value, very Taurus, but also because when we're younger we are given values and, if you like, mothers or fathers' messages that come into our psyche when we're very young. This could be a time when we do push back against some of those ideas that we were first given. Now, if you are around about 42 to 44, you're going to be going through your Uranus opposition. If you're around about 22-ish, you're going to be going through your Uranus square. If you're going through your Uranus return, that means that you're going to be around 84 years of age. And of course, all these events are very, very powerful because angles, particularly the harsher angles, the 8th harmonic, cause tension, and tension's written in. It's baked into this event just like it was when Uranus first moved into Taurus in 2018. So whatever we're attached to that's not really working for us, whether it's an attitude, not quite a belief system, but maybe we're a bit stuck in our ways, Taurus in a kind of lower vibration way, even a bit stubborn, we're being asked to be more flexing, because if we don't flex, that creates the tension. So we need to find some agility within that fixed energy. And talking about the debilities, in terms of Uranus being in its full, it's blessed, of course, in Aquarius, because that is the sign it rules as the co-regent. It's in its detriment in the sign of Leo, but it's actually interestingly exalted in the sign of Scorpio. But have you noticed something about all of those essential dignities? They're all in fixed signs for a planet which relishes change and revolution. So whenever Uranus is making its way through these angular fixed signs, it is always going to create some resistance, as much as some tension, as much as some potential breakthroughs. Now, what about our connection in terms of our spiritual dimensions? So that's where Uranus is very, very lovely. Because of the duality of Aquarius, Saturn, traditional ruler, is about the continuity, the fixed sign, and appreciation of people that we've known for some time, and loyalty and so forth. Whereas Uranus is the other tension, it's much more about twist, and whereas obviously Saturn's about sticks, so there's a natural tussle going on. But how can we draw down that energy, that heavenly energy of Uranus which rules the sky? If you think about the glyph of the sign of Aquarius, which is an air sign, it's the water bearer. What does that mean? Well, the water bearer is carrying the water. That's linked to baptism. It's about higher knowledge. So one of the things we can try to do, whether we're thinking about our values, our resources, our attitude to money, our attitude to what we eat and drink, because Taurus is very much about food. Uranus likes things to be very authentic. The more we can strip down our diets into things that are locally grown is ideal. If you can afford it, organics. If you can't, wash what you do eat, but eat as much as what comes out the ground, not what comes out of a factory that's processed, which it doesn't matter, you know, whatever type of processed food it is, it really isn't very good for us. We are seeing a lot of conditions linked to stomach problems, and I think a lot of it is to do with processed foods, the stabilizers, the chemicals that are in the food chain, the packaging that they're in. It's not the same. We don't get the same quality, and Taurus appreciates quality, and of course it's a very sensual sign as well. But we can also, with Taurus being in Uranus, get some very unexpected opportunities. And one of the opportunities we could get is to connect to someone in a very sensual way. But will we avoid that opportunity because we'd rather stay with what we know, what's familiar, Taurus, or do we show that daring do, Uranus? Again, another tension, but that moving on that energy can actually give us a sense of fulfillment if we do take on a challenge. So that's another thing to consider. But if you have been feeling stuck, a sense of inertia in any part of your life, and particularly if you have got planets in the latter part of those earth signs, but I will say to you, if you have got planets on the first 2 degrees of any mutable sign, so in turn that's Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius and Pisces. So if since the 7th of July you felt things have been very restless, you felt a sense of tension, irritability, found it more difficult to sleep, you've had more adrenal outburst, it's just very hard to let go, put the electrical devices down and so forth, all very, very understandable. I'm terrible for reading my phone, believe me, so I am not speaking from a position of mastering this at all, but it is important for all of us to try to get on the earth. And of course Uranus appreciates space, freedom and independence. So if we can get out into the countryside and the earth, and we have some physical connection to the root of our situation, that's very healing as well. So we have a great opportunity to do that, and it can be very liberating. So see the Uranus retrograde, particularly with the practice that we've had generally over the last 7 years, to still confront the things that you haven't quite escaped from, perhaps the habits that you feel very comforted by but don't really give you much joy, the people that limit you and perhaps you're a little worried about separating from because you feel that you will be an eternal loser. Uranus essentially, as I mentioned, is about higher truths, authenticity, being in touch with what really makes us an individual. In the most progressive way, it doesn't mean to say that we can't still collaborate and cooperate, because that's one of the energies of Aquarius at its best. It is about using industry, Saturn, but in a way which helps us all together. So, if you do find yourself joining a particular club, if you're a maker or a creator, fantastic opportunity through to the end of April. If you've moved to a new area and you connect with people who share your passion for the arts, very Taurus, creativity, whether it's through applique, whether it's through the whole food scene, whether it's through healing, whichever group, very Uranus, where you can just feel part of something but very earthed, but at the same time retain your individual self, that's a fabulous opportunity. But we have to understand that with Mars in that opposition, the ignition point that we had so strongly at the start of this really challenging journey is still going to be there. Saturn is trying to provide some levitation and modulation, but unfortunately, because of Venus being in the quincunx, the ruler of the sign of Taurus, in the sign of Scorpio, which is very much about desire, our desire to get what we want is still going to be amped up. So we've got to just keep working at it within ourselves. I'm going to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you a flavour of what you can expect. Please stay with me for that. But if you've yet to do so, please subscribe to the channel. Help it to continue to thrive. Check out my new website at patrickarundell.com. Get your free daily horoscope fired to your device each morning. And now I'll go through each of the 12 signs from Aries to Pisces. So Aries, if you watch my preamble, you'll know that your ruler Mars has been right at the heart of Uranus's journey through the sign of Taurus from the middle of May 2018. And as Uranus returns back into the sign of Taurus on the 8th of November, once more Mars is in the mix in a direct opposition. What Mars and Uranus do together in a harsh angle is create the potential for impetuousness, things to move very quickly. Now that can be just feeling a bit agitated, nervous, wound up, maybe finding it hard to relax, all the way actually to converting that energy to make very dramatic moves quickly. And that is something you have a talent for at the best of times. So as we do have the return of Uranus to Taurus through to the 26th of April next year, you may find yourself still trying to work out finally about something to do with your income or the foundation of your financial situation. And you may have tried a lot of different and innovative and fresh things in the interim since May 2018, and some of them may have worked out really well. And you may have had an opportunity this year from July the 7th as Uranus joined in with Pluto, Saturn and also Neptune at that time in your sign to really start to gain traction on some of the new ideas that you've had. But if it has been a little bit elusive, you could be feeling a sense of frustration as this final leg of the 84-year journey begins. But what you can do is use your tremendous determination and absolute desire not to just accept the status quo. So even if you try a few things and you experiment between now and the end of April, don't beat yourself up if not every single one of them comes off, because I just think you're going to be very inventive. I think you're going to find some very fresh ways to do things. If you are interested in technology that can still work for you, I think what Uranus is asking you in Taurus is, however brilliant your ideas are, always take it down to a very basic level. You know, the idea you have may be ingenious, but will it give you a return? Does it provide a practical service? All earth signs are very much interested in that kind of tangible outcome. So whatever brilliance you may have, it still has to have a practical application. And if you think that and apply that principle, you can still make progress. I think what might require some extra care is anything to do with shared finances, or even in a romantic context. If you're in a relationship which it feels a bit possessive, maybe it comes from the other person, not you, because I think that's something that you're going to resist in a major way. So that part of you that can be very assertive, very bold, risk-taking, it could be there through to the 26th of April. But also it's important to understand there's still quite a lot of psychological influences formulating at the back end of your chart. So if you do something daring and different, just factor in what the potential downside might be first, especially if you are speculating to accumulating, and it is to do hard-earned resources from the past. But if you are wanting some excitement around travel, meeting different people, experimenting with different food types, I think you're going to be very open to it. But if you're in a relationship that feels very clingy, or someone doesn't really share your values, or they're rather draining, or perhaps possessive or jealousy, I think it's going to be a relationship that will require a lot of hard work. Doesn't mean to say you can't keep it going, but it will require hard work on both sides, because you're entering a period now when you're determined to push forwards and complete some of the things you've been experimenting with in recent years, and you want to get to a point of stability through the process. You can order your year 2026 personal horoscope forecast and get 30% off the rest of this year free, your life roadmap report too, and your free gift of your general love Chinese and Indian forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video. So Taurus, how did Uranus influence you from that first blush in May 2018 on the 15th through to the 6th of November? That may have been a bit of a difficult period for your career, I believe. You may have experienced someone who was a micromanager, who really wanted you to change what you were doing. It may have felt rather oppressive. They may have been pushing very, very hard. And in some ways, it may have felt they were trying to dominate you. You may have even experienced that in a personal relationship. It may have been someone who's very, very outspoken, and you do like to keep the peace, but not all the way to just take in anything. So you may have pushed back. So that could have been a challenging period. And then when Uranus moved into your sign full time on March the 6th, 2019, depending on where you have your sun, your ascendant, your moon, or you have other planets gathered around your personal chart. When there have been angles or conjunctions forged, how has it influenced you? If you are someone who has liked to do things in a very stable way, you may have had to recalibrate at times. Do you know, it was interesting because I think Pluto in Capricorn, although it was a very challenging influence for many of us, not least when we had the conjunction of Pluto, Saturn and Jupiter, which coalesced around COVID, I feel for you what Pluto did since 2008, it started to give you an appetite to widen your horizons, whether it was through travel, whether it was through higher education, whether it was through qualifications professionally. So I think that archetype of your sign being very, very much adhered to what you feel comfortable with, like that old pair of cozy slippers, I don't feel it's entirely true. And of course, you know, you could have Aries in your natal chart influences, you could have Gemini influences, but if you have got a lot of Taurus influences packed into your chart, a cluster, a stellium, maybe as Uranus has passed over them, you have felt at times the need to be much more of the rebel, be much more spontaneous. You may have surprised some people around you. And of course, the sign of Taurus can be about money, how we earn a living, but it also can be about what we eat. And you may have made quite a few changes during that period of time, or switchbacks. You may still be searching for the perfect outcome for you. If that's the case, between now and the 26th of April, gives you one final celestial window to try and find your true purpose, where you can balance having some kind of framework which feels comfortable and stable and secure, but at the same time your flair and creativity, which is often extraordinarily strong, especially if you're an artist or a maker or a creator, those energies can be really maxed up in a very positive way. But just don't surprise yourself from a romantic viewpoint, because as this event occurs, you do have the Sun and also Venus in your sector of relating. It may be around your love life that you have some extra excitement between now and the end of the spring, and just whether you'll welcome that or not is just down to your unique situation. But I think it could get a bit hot and heavy at times, but if you're still trying to find that way to be inventive, entrepreneurial, fresh in your approach to how you bring money in and retain a sense of independence, very Uranus, you have this chance to keep pushing on to find the final outcome. You can order your year 2026 personal horoscope forecast and get 30% off the rest of this year free, your life roadmap report too, and your free gift of your general love Chinese and Indian forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video. So Gemini, one of the intriguing things for you between now, particularly February the 4th, while the retrograde is still ongoing of Uranus, but through to the 26th of April, when Uranus returns back to your sign, anything to do with your nervous system or your psychology, which is not quite integrated into your total being, is something you may have a chance to reprise. But see it as a glorious opportunity, because I think Uranus moving into your sign on July the 7th, forging a fab link with Pluto, Saturn and Neptune, what's known as a golden triangle, very, very rare. And you may have already started to take some step forwards in a very dashing and exciting way. So suddenly this retrograde can just push you back into looking at things that maybe are not absolutely complete. So if you have been feeling edgy, finding it very difficult to sleep, perhaps old thoughts, things that didn't go well in the past, breakups, accidents, that's life, isn't it? It can be a very challenging journey at times, and you may have to really face some very tender issues to really make the most of this opportunity, because if you do, you can bring them into you. If you try to ignore them and push them away, you know, whether it is our fears and anxieties, the shadow side of our nature, the parts of our personality we're not very fond of, stuff like that. So if you're someone who's really into personal development, you enjoy astrology, you want to use astrology to unlock greater personal awareness, to understand what makes you tick at a deeper level is going to be such an enriching thing to do, even if you've been doing a lot of it over the last 7 years, because I think you could be surprised at times between now and the end of April about some of the things that come up. Because you're a very logical sign, an air sign, Uranus is an edgy energy. The 12th house, you know, you may in your personal chart have planets in the sign of Taurus, or even in your 12th natal chart. But I think for most Gemini people on the whole, there is a tendency to use your intellect in order to, as a foil, a quick foil for any challenges that come your way. And of course you have this delicious ability to flex and pivot and always seem to be mesmerizing people with your great gift as a magician, essentially. But I think that that gift is going to be somewhat challenged. But the most important thing to understand is your relationship with yourself, because Uranus is about higher truths. So if you can look at some of those awkward, tender, sensitive issues around loss, around feeling perhaps abandoned, about some people that you don't really trust, maybe about those so-called hidden enemies that you get in traditional astrology, very 12th house. If you're really going to face them front on, you have a much more positive opportunity to make this next period through to the end of April really work for you and emerge from it feeling cleansed. You've released things that have been dragging you down for a long time. So, fabulous opportunity. Also, another thing that might happen, you could have some sudden reconnections to people from your past, whether that's for good or bad. You know, it may be that it will happen very, very accidentally, spontaneously, but if it does, it's going to be intriguing. You can order your year 2026 personal horoscope forecast and get 30% off the rest of this year free, your life roadmap report too, and your free gift of your general love Chinese and Indian forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video. So Cancer, you've had a period since July the 7th through to today, November the 8th, when a lot of stuff may have come up that you weren't expecting, because that's what Uranus in the 12th house can do. You're someone with a real appreciation of your environment, of tuning into your senses, being protective, but one of your defaults can be to withdraw. And you may have needed to withdraw a little bit over these last few months, particularly if something has unsettling happened to you, because if your birthday is at the early part of Cancer, when Saturn moved into Aries initially and then Jupiter played catch up, there was a square between Jupiter and Saturn on the 15th of June, but also a square between Saturn and the Sun. So if you're very early in Cancer, you may have been feeling, particularly around your work, quite a lot of a burdensome energy. And also, this may, with Uranus in your 12th house, have been feeding into your nervous system. You may have felt, you know, a little bit ragged at times, exhausted. Your adrenal system may have felt overwhelmed. So Uranus moving back into Taurus in a way does have a real bonus for you, because it's reminding you that one of the great pleasures generally for you since 2019, March the 6th, as you have connected with different people. And I feel that some of those people have been fresh, very independent souls, people who maybe push the boundaries a little bit. They're not quite so conservative, but they're certainly intriguing. And the other thing is that the 11th house can be about our future, but it's also about our higher purpose. So you may have found yourself generally over the last 7 years pursuing things that really gave you a greater sense of connection to what was really important. So you may find yourself getting back into that. If you have had a period of reclusiveness or disconnection, there may be an opportunity to reconnect to some of the people who are important in your world. But we have to acknowledge that as this journey begins, Uranus is clashing with Venus, the planet which rules the sign of Taurus, and your ruler is clashing with Saturn and Neptune. So as this event occurs, the moon's in the sign of Gemini, and it's in your 12th house. It's in Peregrine in Gemini. It doesn't really know what to do with itself, but that for you is your 12th house, and Saturn and Neptune are in the 9th house. So I think something could still come up that you're not quite expecting over the next few months. Stuff can come into the open. It may be to do with someone's attitude, it may be to do with revelations, maybe some of your strands that you're involved with in the moment aren't quite working for you. So what you may find between now and the end of April is some kind of reset from the knowledge you've learned with the initial visit of Uranus to Gemini, but I think more broadly, getting back on track with what was working for you, if it has felt a little bit helter-skelter of late. But I think that, yeah, I think some information can come up. I wouldn't be too open about some very deeply private matters, especially if you're meeting some new friends in the interim between now and the end of April. You can order your year 2026 personal horoscope forecast and get 30% off the rest of this year free, your life roadmap report too, and your free gift of your general love Chinese and Indian forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video. So Leo, Uranus moving back into Taurus is really intriguing. If you have changed your job over the last 7 years, or where you work has kept, the management or the structure of the business or its strategic direction have kept shifting, it really wouldn't be a surprise. Or have you pushed yourself into new terrain, new territory? Because just like Taurus, Scorpio and Aquarius being a fixed sign, you can have a disinclination to change. And if your sun is at the end of the sign of Leo, you're going to feel this particular event through to the end of April quite strongly. So if you're not quite settled with what you're doing, you don't feel stimulated, you're not releasing your talents to a wider audience in a way which really firmly reflects your brilliance, individuality and more innovative spirit, it's another chance to try that. But what could happen is that you could find yourself in a big business which itself is being affected by the wider way that the world is changing. So the shifting could be not necessarily what you choose. So the best thing to do as a Leo, being a fixed sign, is just be determined to be flexible, because the more we can just be ready to flex, the more when change does come our way, we're not rigidly receiving that energy, which can be very hard. It's a bit like being in a static vehicle. When someone runs into the back of us, that can be very unpleasant. So just be open-minded about what you can do if you haven't quite cracked finding the right role for you, which gives you a certain amount of flexibility, helps you to be yourself. You can still collaborate with others, but you get a certain amount of admiration and adulation for your shining charisma. That's what you need to be looking out for between now and the end of April. You can order your year 2026 personal horoscope forecast and get 30% off the rest of this year free, your life roadmap report too, and your free gift of your general love Chinese and Indian forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video. So for you, Virgo, you have an appreciation of structures, of routines, of things being ordered. It's not always quite as straightforward as the archetype of your sign. That my son is a Virgo and he does have all his CDs. Well, he doesn't use CDs anymore. They've all been put away because they've all been recorded. So they're all being accessed digitally. But the thing is, that might be one part of the way that you are ordered, but there may be other parts of your nature that you're much more free-spirited. And over the last 7 years, if you have gone on a long journey to somewhere that's really different, or you've learnt a language or a musical instrument, or gone on a course which has given you a lot of knowledge that's really fresh and different, well, brilliant. You've been surfing the energy of Uranus in your 9th house in an absolutely fantastic way. But what, particularly with Pluto in the sign of Aquarius, influencing in terms of its change agenda, that appreciation you have of things being rather metronomic, if that metronomic existence is in some ways really becoming rather dull and you're not enjoying it very much, maybe you need to push yourself around what you do for a living. And of course, Uranus in Taurus is essentially about money. And maybe that could be through remote working, because of the space that Uranus appreciates, using technology, Uranus appreciates. It could be part home, part work. It may be more than one job, working for different people that you find stimulating. It could be a role that helps you to work your life around your children. It may be that you want to start your own enterprise. But if something isn't quite working around your work situation at the moment, through to the end of April, this is your chance to change that. But if you've yet to go on that really different experience, it doesn't matter if it's a night out, a band, a new hobby, just doing something that switches you on and gives you some escapism can be such a positive thing to embrace. You can order your year 2026 personal horoscope forecast and get 30% off the rest of this year free, your life roadmap report too, and your free gift of your general love Chinese and Indian forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video. Libra, ever since July the 7th, Uranus has been in your fellow air sign of Gemini, which of course is about quick exchanges of ideas, can be about restlessness, maybe even short journeys. But for you, that represents the 9th house, the big picture. So if you have been doing a lot of reading, maybe watching videos, gaining a lot more information on any subject that truly stimulates you, it wouldn't be a surprise. But equally, the 9th house can be about escapism, freedom and independence. So if something's changed in your situation around a job or a relationship where you became much more conscious of creating that personal space, which Uranus appreciates, not a surprise either. Now Uranus moves back into the deep 8th house, quite complex. Now the 8th house for you is an echo of the energy of Scorpio, where ironically, again, Uranus is in its exaltation. So you can use its energy through to the end of April, the 26th of April, in a constructive way. But if you have been finding long-term finances, anything to do with property matters, entrepreneurship, an area that's been very intriguing, but also very changeable or frustrating, that wouldn't be a complete surprise, because Uranus can be a very unpredictable energy. But it's that spark which also keeps us very interested. Now the other thing about the 8th house is it can be where we're deeply devoted, but Uranus doesn't do deep devotion easily. It's not going to give up or give away its appreciation of independence and space. So if you have encountered some moments of fantastic passion since May 2018, but also relationships that have burnt out really quite quickly, that neither would be a surprise. But all of this has taught you a lot, how to handle your money, the things that you might speculate around, but also how you connect to others and how you maintain your need to have sincere relationships and still being open to a connection, but not giving away your power too easily. So there's been quite a big period of rehearsal. So what you can do from now and through to the end of April is use all the lessons and experiences you've gained to use that Uranian energy in a much more constructive way. So, for example, if you did meet someone you really like, but you decide not to cohabit, it doesn't mean to say the relationship can't really flourish. It may be one of you wanted that in the past, but if it didn't suit you or it didn't suit the other person, just being at peace with your independence, but also having the connection, that's a good way to surf that energy. If you have been interested in making money in different ways, because the 8th house is very much about long-term financial planning, maybe it has been some new technologies that have captured your imagination. But of course those can catch fire in terms of their value, but also devalue as well. So you do need to be quite canny working with Uranus in the 8th house. But if you are trying to make something work, you're trying to be connected to someone where the goalposts keep moving, maybe you need to think about how that impacts on you and be more protective on your personal situation. You can order your year 2026 personal horoscope forecast and get 30% off the rest of this year free, your life roadmap report too, and your free gift of your general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video. So Scorpio, Uranus moves back into your 7th house. The 7th house is where we relate. It can be where we compete. It can be where we need to be combative. It can be where we become more conscious of open enemies, as they call it in traditional astrology. Uranus is a kind of, obviously a very fast moving electric energy. You may have had some connections since May 2018 last year that have really made your pulse race. Have they actually stayed in your life? That may be more challenging. There also could have been quite the clash in your family situation that occurred in those first 4 or 5 months of 2018. Maybe there was a big falling out. You may have felt more intolerant of someone else's vulnerabilities or difficulties. You may have been much more assertive or much more reactive if you didn't feel that they were giving you what you needed. But since then, I think as you've worked with the energy of Uranus, as long as you've not been too attached, because with thick signs, but also particularly with Taurus and Scorpio, it can be very much to do with ownership. And you may have had to work on that part of your nature that does want a degree of primacy. And it may be that a partner's wanted to pursue their own interests a bit more than you have. Or maybe it's you. Maybe there has been somebody who's entered into your orbit who has been very tempting. You may have had some kind of fling. You may have had more than one fling. But if you're craving for a more stable relationship, Uranus in the 7th house certainly asks you to make sure it's with someone where the terms of reference are very clearly worked out. But you know, that changeability could have worked out around your employment situation as well, because it's the literal equivalent of a situation that may have kept shifting, because people may have been telling you things in a way being completely sincere as they saw it at that time, but then the circumstances have rapidly changed and then that's required some flexing. So it's been unsettling, but it doesn't mean to say it hasn't thrown up some amazing opportunities as well, because I think it might have done. But if you would like to meet someone, then obviously having Venus and the Sun in your sign when this event occurs, and having Uranus essentially in your 7th house, does suggest that relationships could be exciting. They certainly won't be dull, but I think getting that balance between what you want as an individual, what you're prepared to give, but also being able to flex to what the other person wants from you is going to be the challenge. You can order your year 2026 personal horoscope forecast and get 30% off the rest of this year free, your life roadmap report too, and your free gift of your general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video. So Sagittarius, one of the things that I think is an anathema to archers is dull routines, because you're a fire sign, which means you're passionate, you've got fantastic curiosity, but because you're a mutable sign, things just being very regular doesn't generally work that well for you. Now, over the last 2 years in particular, Saturn's been asking you to work on your inner world, get more in touch with foundational stuff, where you live, how you collaborate with those that live there. And it may have been frustrating at times, may have felt a bit stodgy, maybe even very tender, but it's been good for your inner work. What Uranus has done generally, before it moved into your opposite sign in July, since 2018, it could have made your work situation or those daily routines constantly shifting, and that may have actually been quite hard work at times. So even for someone like you, who doesn't necessarily like each day to be as regulated and modulated as, say, a Virgo, but you may think as you go through these next month through to the end of April about all the things that you've actually learned, that it's all very well being very routine, but what do you get out of it? And if you've been doing things that are more challenging and pushing you mentally, or you've learnt new skills, or you've changed your job, but it actually has certainly not been dull, and there is an accumulative gain that you've been having, then it will be worth all the hard work by the time you get to the end of April. But you know, it's possible for some Sagittarians that self-employment works very well with Uranus in the 6th house, because you can start when you want, and if you want to work into the small hours of the morning, that's up to you. Whereas if you work in a more corporate environment, that kind of stuff is much more out of reach. So if you're someone who really enjoys things to be quite fluid, Uranus works for you. If you're someone who likes things to be a bit more ordered, say for example if you have got Scorpio or Capricornian energy in your natal chart, then I think that Uranus at times has been quite exasperating. And just be aware the 6th house can be about things like animals, pets, can be about aunts and uncles, can be about where we provide services, it can also be about our physical health, and it can be about virtue. And Uranus can be about looking at things in a fresh way. So if you peer a light on some parts of your existence that could be perhaps a bit more virtuous, the more you learn, the better it will be. But it's a rare archer that isn't always open to new knowledge. You can order your year 2026 personal horoscope forecast and get 30% off the rest of this year free, your life roadmap report too, and your free gift of your general love Chinese and Indian forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video. Capricorn, you've got a reputation which I think is entirely unjustified as being very hardworking, very applied. You go through the processes, you stick at things, and you work slowly but surely towards a goal or a target. But I think it is true to say that your working situation since July the 7th through today may have felt a little chaotic. And the thing with Uranus going back into your 5th house through to the 26th of April, the 5th house can be about fun, it can be about invention, it also can be about speculation and risk. But most of all, it can be about showcasing our talents in a fulsome, charismatic way. And one of the things with Uranus is it pushes us to show our most authentic side. And if when you were younger, for example, you did run a little bit on the shy side, a bit reserved, this is an opportunity through to the end of April to just get back into the fabulous vibe of Uranus in the 5th house, because it's asking you to let go a little bit and use those very deep qualities that you possess of resilience, of application, but use them in perhaps more novel, fresh and cutting edge ways. So whether it's around your love or social situations, whether it's around work or a creative idea you've got, turn up the volume, but just know that with Mars in your 12th house, in an opposition to Uranus, it's possible that at times you could feel a bit up and down, and your emotions can switch around in quite rapid ways. So it's important to find an outlet for the talents you've got, otherwise frustration can pick up. You can order your year 2026 personal horoscope forecast and get 30% off the rest of this year free, your life roadmap report too, and your free gift of your general love Chinese and Indian forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video. So Aquarius, Uranus is your glorious modern ruler, your co-regent. And Uranus is what gives you that appreciation of being more forward thinking. Now, there is a characterization that tends to come up in magazines that you're zany, changeable, contrary, difficult, argumentative, very outspoken. Well, good for you if so. But I think there's a lot more to Aquarius people than that, because there is a duality. Saturn is about that constant appreciation of foundations and perhaps the way it has been. So that makes you a very perfect person to deal with the world as it is now, where we have got sweeping change coming in, but there's still some of those old ways, good manners, grace, consideration for others, linked to a progressive technological future that can free us up in some ways, but we don't need to replace people. You understand this more than others. But if you cast your mind back to May 2018, I think there was a big situation for you at that time, and it may have been around your family, it may have been around where you lived, and the turbulence and that conflict or that tension may not have been resolved, because what Uranus has done ever since then, through to July the 7th this year, when it moved into a more playful, free-spirited area, and now with it moving back to Taurus, is it could bring up some of those issues that aren't quite resolved. So for example, if you're living somewhere that's too cramped, Uranus likes space. If you're living somewhere too big, well, that doesn't work either if it's not a practical environment to function in, because that's your Saturnian side. It needs to work, be functional. And then it could be around the actual environment you live in. Is it somewhere that's too busy, too quiet? Is it an atmosphere in the immediate locality that you're happy with? Are there people still in your family or emotional circle that are very changeable, which is quite challenging, or they expect you to always fall in with what they want you to do? So all of those electric energies may have made your home and emotional life really quite restless over the interim years. We've moved home 3 times and that has not been easy at all. And there has been some, big stuff to have been done in each of the 3 properties, and juggling that with work has been challenging. But of course what Uranus does is it connects us to what our higher purpose is. So what your higher purpose is in terms of your emotional life is the window of opportunity celestially right from now to the 26th of April. But there could be some bumpiness, particularly because of the new solar eclipse series, which begins on the 17th of February in your sign. It's late in Aquarius and it clashes with Uranus. So over the next 6 months, even beyond the scope at the end of April, if there's something that needs to be shook out of your emotional world that's not working for you, you need to face it. You can order your year 2026 personal horoscope forecast and get 30% off the rest of this year free, your life roadmap report too, and your free gift of your general love Chinese and Indian forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video. So Pisces, over the last few months, as Uranus has been in your 4th house from the 7th of July, you may have felt really quite on edge when it comes to where you live, moving the furniture around. Maybe you got some new gear, got rid of some old gear, decluttered, sold stuff off, taken what you don't want to a charity shop. Maybe you've needed a bit more space. Maybe you felt the impulse to get in contact with people you hadn't seen for a while. So it's been a bit jumpy, but now Uranus returns to the 3rd house. The 3rd house can influence our nervous system, but it most certainly can influence our mode of communication. So it's kind of Gemini-like, quick, but of course the sign of Taurus is about communicating with a purpose, particularly around money, maybe about resources, buying and selling things online, and all of that can really call out to you from now through to the end of April. But if your work does involve any kind of technology and you're not paid properly, or you don't feel valued, or there's a lot of stress without much appreciation, that's something you may have to genuinely look at. Because with Pluto tucked up in your 12th house, even if you try to stand away from some of the challenges or create space from the co-worker you don't particularly like, or work remotely, whatever you do, what Pluto's doing in your 12th house is stirring up a deep sediment of where you really need to get in contact and touch with when it comes to your deeper psychological needs. So that's still out there. You do have Venus and the Sun in the 9th house of your situation, so travel could call out to you. But with Mars right at the top of your chart, if your working situation isn't feeling as it should, Mars is giving you a big push to have self-belief, to set up some interviews, do some presentations, Put your best foot forwards, raise your profile, and have a complete amount of confidence in the brilliant, unique ideas that Uranus is helping you to generate and will do right through to the end of April. So go for it in as a fulsome way as you possibly can. You can order your year 2026 personal horoscope forecast and get 30% off the rest of this year free, your life roadmap report too, and your free gift of your general love Chinese and Indian forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video.